Morning, everybody, and welcome to the first of a three-part video series on the structure of college essays. For our first video, we'll feature the introduction. All right, welcome everybody. This is my desk setup for the moment, and I thought I would share with you writing it out by hand. Please excuse my poor penmanship, but a quick disclaimer. First thing, 5 paragraphs is going to be the bare minimum that you ever want to write for a college essay, because what you will be rewarded for is showing your knowledge and understanding and your critical thought. So the more complicated you can make the paper, the more that paper will be appreciated by your faculty. All right. So first off, we start with our introduction. And so let me go ahead and get this down for us. So here's our intro. We're going to start then with an opening hook. Okay. Now the hook is really designed to be an attention getter for all of your readers. And this allows you to set the tone of what your writing is going to be. It allows you to set up what the topic may be as well as you hint toward it. Now, ways to do this, I always like starting with story. So for instance, if you were writing an essay that was dealing with a topic like Black Lives Matter, you could potentially find a news article and use that as the opening hook. You know, an incident, something that's happened. Now, that's not giving away what the whole thesis is going to be about the argument. It's just setting the tone. It's just grabbing people's attention. So I think story always works really well. Next, you could always set up an opening quote and then explain the significance of the quote to start. You can use a statistic, maybe something shocking that you could give context for. Other things that you could do, for instance, you could set up a question, for instance. Oftentimes questions in essays are never really questions because we are guiding our reader directly and funneling them to our thesis statement. So it may seem like it's a question, but really it's loaded. It's a rhetorical strategy to get people to already start swaying and agreeing with you in argument. So be very careful with the question. It can't allow the reader so much freedom that they just disagree with you automatically as your opening hook. So a lot of strategy required for that. And please let me know if you have extra questions about it. But the star, I think, of all of them, I would recommend story to begin. And then after we have our opening hook, then this is where you would provide any background or context that your readers would need to have to be able to understand what your argument is about. You never want to assume that the reader, even if it's a faculty member, will totally get everything that you're putting in the paper. Your job is to show mastery over the material and concepts. So this is where you include things like key definitions for your paper so that you don't have to set them up later. This is where you give history. If you're writing a paper, say, about a particular kind of movement or about a particular kind of law in our society, well, this is where you would give that kind of background as it pertains to the rest of your argument you're setting up. It could also be summaries. So if you are writing an argument that is incorporating other people's ideas, say something from Rereading America that has a couple different authors that you will be using throughout the paper, summarizing their work and introducing the authors could be really important background and context so you don't have to do it again later. So just some ideas of how you could set that up. For instance, if you were writing an argument that was dealing with 2 different kinds of engine types for vehicles, then I think your background and context would actually be pretty deep in terms of all the things you would be setting up for your average reader to understand, okay? Lastly, we get into our thesis statement. And the thesis is essentially the heart and soul of the entire essay. This is going to be what your argument is in one sentence. And so that's why we place so much attention on it. I always recommend to place it at the very end of your introduction. We'll have more detail about the thesis statement coming up. I'll have a whole separate video for you. But essentially, the thesis statement, I advise you to always end your introduction with it. That way, your reader, it creates a natural transition into your body paragraphs, but your reader clearly understands, okay, this is the argument, this is what's at stake, and what the writer is trying to prove. Okay? So, uh, key mistakes to avoid, a few different things. So notice the ordering that we put in here. It basically all funnels down into, something more broad, then eventually getting those terms and all of that other key information down into then setting up what the argument is. One of the mistakes that people could make would be starting with the thesis as the opening sentence. And I see this from a lot of writers when they start with an argument like Fullerton College needs more parking, for instance. There is no tone being set initially, and it reads kind of jarring. It would be as if somebody on the street that you are just meeting for the first time comes up and then tells you what they're all about, or their agenda, or what they need from you, which I think doesn't immediately ingratiate them to us, right? So this is why when meeting somebody for the first time, and I think of reading essays similar to that, you want to set it up and take your time through this before you get into your agenda. An analogy I've used in the past was that if you were on a blind date and meeting somebody for the first time, you kind of get to know them a little through that opening hook before you hit them with what you're all about. So you wouldn't necessarily sit with them and then say, hey, let's get married as the opening first sentence of the essay. That you would instead hopefully wait until you knew each other a little bit more, right? So now, in terms of the introduction, this whole thing then is going to be 1+ paragraphs in length, okay? The reason I say 1+ is because if you have a really detailed opening hook, this could be developed as a whole paragraph by itself. The same thing with the background and context. The more you have to set up in terms of definitions or history or whatnot, you could even provide analysis in there before you get to the thesis. This could span several paragraphs. The thesis should always be, though, connected to a previous thought, probably with the background and context, so it's not just floating as one sentence on its own. But there you go, the opening setup for your introduction. We basically here are telling our readers what we are going to be telling them in the essay. All right. Now up next, we're going to talk about body paragraphs. So please do stick around, and I hope to see you in the next video. Thanks, everybody. Bye.